Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about WWF Royal Rumble on the Sega Genesis. The gameplay is kind of disappointing. It's like the other games, has the same control scheme, and yeah, I still really don't like it at all. There are plenty of game modes in this, which makes the control scheme even more of a disappointment, because there's a ton of stuff to do in here. The game has a really great roster too, which I'll talk about later, but right now, let's just get into some of the game modes. You've got a one-on-one match, you've got tag team, then you've got a six-man tag, and then you've got a Royal Rumble. And then within each section, you might have some more options that you can do as well. One thing I want to point out is just how weird the difficulty setting is. In Super WrestleMania, it's a simple, easy, medium, and hard. And then for this game, Royal Rumble, and also the next game, WWF Raw, you select between 1 and 10, but they don't really tell you if 1 is supposed to be easy and 10 is hard. You just kind of assume that, or you experiment and figure out how, awful you actually are at this, or how the difficulty setting works. It's the only time I wish that there was a tutorial on this without having to go into the manual to find out. One thing I forgot with the game modes is that you can select a tournament to play, and you also have the option for a brawl. The brawl is like an early form of a hardcore match, but crappy. There are weapons that you can pick up, but it's not really worth it. You just beat your opponent until their life bar is gone, and then they, I guess, give up. Or they're just knocked unconscious. It's interesting that it's there. I just didn't like it all that much. You can also do a tag team brawl match, but the opponent gets really cheap with those. And yeah, it's a nice change of pace, I guess, but I did not like that game mode at all. Things do get pretty repetitive because of the control scheme, and I feel like it's worse in this game than it was in the previous one. And it's a shame because I would have thought that it could have gotten better with this game, but no, for whatever reason, it feels a little bit worse than it did with Super WrestleMania. Overall, it has more game modes, but I think the controls got a little bit worse than they were with Super WrestleMania, which is a real shame. This is one of the areas that I think the game developers did a much better job with. I think the graphics are a lot better than they were with Super WrestleMania. The sprites are much more detailed, even though they still use the same basic model for everyone. They look much better than they did before. You don't have a character with just a blob of color for their face, so that's a lot nicer. What I don't like is how they're just graphical changes to the same model. It feels kind of lazy, and it reminds me of some of the NES games. I understand that they were just doing this as a license and trying to get the best game that they could out as quickly as they could, because that's kind of how these licensed games go. But yeah, that model thing isn't something that I can really forget about, especially when going back and doing retrospective looks at these. Overall, the graphics are one of the bright spots in this game. The character sprites do look much better than Super WrestleMania, even if I still don't really like them as much. And I think they're closer to what the Super Nintendo games were going to be looking like. The roster for WWF Royal Rumble is really good. I liked it an awful lot. It was better than with Super WrestleMania, and yeah, it just was pretty fun to see all these different wrestlers I remember from when I was a kid. You've got Randy Savage, Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker, Crush, Jim Duggan, Lex Luger, Shawn Michaels, Rick Martel, Papa Shango, Razor Ramon, and IRS. Yes, I continue to play as Papa Shango, and I kind of like that part more with the Sega Genesis version. It still is kind of interesting to see all of the stats being given for these wrestlers and seeing like how different they should be looking than what their character sprites are. But it's great that you have this large of a roster on a game like this, because it offers a little bit more variety than some of the other games. One thing that I think is kind of weird, and I didn't mention it was Super WrestleMania, was how there are no like tag teams in this game. You just kind of have to create tag teams on the fly with the wrestlers that you have. And that seems a little bit weird to me, and I could be very wrong on this. But when I look over the roster, I don't see a lot of characters that were in tag teams together. I see some that would be kind of cool to have in tag teams, but I don't really see any where it's like, okay, the Road Warriors are going to be in this, or you're going to have Sting and Lex Luger where they would, they would tag up every once in a while. Or to bring it back to the WWF, you don't have Diesel in here where he was in a tag team with Shawn Michaels at one point. It's strange to really see that. And you have Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, and they were in a tag team for a brief period. But you don't really have tag teams in the games yet, and you really wouldn't until like the PlayStation and N64 games. You might have them by accident every once in a while, like you will find here, but it's weird to have a roster like this with just no tag teams in it. I do like that this game has a larger roster than Super WrestleMania, and I do like that the graphics are a little bit better. But yeah, that control scheme is really just messing with me the entire time that I'm playing this. This is just one of those games that I probably would have liked a lot more in the 90s than I do now. It isn't as bad as some of the SNES wrestling games, but it has a number of flaws that kind of become more apparent when you start to compare it with like the PlayStation and the N64 games. Also, I'm just not really a fan of the button mashing controls with this. It feels really awkward, and yeah, I don't like wearing my hand out while I'm trying to play a game. The characters do look closer to their real-world counterparts, even if the body shapes don't make any sense when you look at them. But at least they look a lot better than they do in Super WrestleMania. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.